Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this month's edition of Métis Coffee Talk. My name is Keith Henry. I'm the president and CEO for the BC Métis Federation, coming to you live from our Vancouver office for this Thursday, March 27th. I just can't believe how fast we're 3 months into the new year, not even a new year anymore, but certainly things are moving fast here. I want to welcome everyone tonight. I know people are just signing on. I will be following along online. If you have any comments or thoughts or anything, any response to any of the information we're going to share with you tonight. But I'm joined with some guests, and to my right and your left, I want to welcome back to the show Mr. Joe Desjardins. How you doing, Joe?
I'm good, doing well. Thanks, Keith.
You want to say hi to everyone tonight, or anything you want to share for this March?
Well, yeah, you're right. It's 3 months in, and here we are in the end of March. It's just galloping towards spring here, but it's been raining for the last, what, 2 weeks solid? So
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
just about drowning in Vancouver, but
yeah.
hopefully it'll turn better. Nice to see everybody, and we'll talk a bit more.
Yeah. Well, Joe will join me also online, though. Joe, not only with us, we have a special guest here as well joining us for this March edition. I want to welcome Robin McClay. Robin, welcome to your first time, I believe, for Métis Coffee Talk. How are you doing this evening, Robin?
I'm doing very well, thank you, and I appreciate being featured on Coffee Talk. I'm a big fan. I've attended a couple of the sessions in the past, and I'm a relatively new board member as well.
That's right. Well, Robin, we're going to get to know you tonight. Where are you joining us from, Robin?
I'm joining you from Vancouver Island in Victoria, and I also I got a place in Parksville, so I'm on the island.
Perfect. Well, I know everyone's going to want to hear more about what you have to say. I mean, you'll be talking a bit about some of the work you do and things, of course. And of course, we'll come back to you shortly, Robin. But just want to say welcome to both Joe and Robin tonight. I just want to and welcome all of you. And again, I will remind people as we go through the show this evening, we will obviously cut to any questions, or if anyone has any comments, questions, or things they want to share, please don't be afraid to write and of course, ask away. Before we jump into the show, though, I just want to say, obviously, the world is a very interesting place right now. We see lots of changes and potentially. We are on the, now been pushed into a federal election. So this April 28th, we got to make sure that as Métis people, we get out, we vote. Doesn't matter what party or whoever you support. I'm not here to tell people to vote Liberal, NDP, Conservative, Green Party, or whatever. But of course, I will always strongly, and I know the Federation, our leadership supports it. We get out and we make sure that we vote for the parties that we think reflect who we hopefully can help our communities. So the only thing I will say in my commentary on the election is that I am concerned about the election campaign in the sense that I know that we're dealing with U.S. tariff threats, which impacts our Métis businesses and will impact ultimately the economy and our sort of standards of living and potentially procurement opportunities for some of our Métis small businesses and jobs. But I am worried that the election. This is one of the few federal elections I've seen in the last number of them where Indigenous issues are so invisible so far. I hope that it somehow our issues and the way that we help support Indigenous people in this country, whether you're First Nation, Métis, or Inuit, does get more profile. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I have to say it's only been, the first week of the campaigning, but so far we've been inundated with tariff and Trump and tariffs and Trump and tariffs and Trump and the economy. And so I know those are all important. Don't get me wrong, because I live in a world where it affects me in many different ways professionally as well. But I do worry that we aren't talking about some of the Indigenous issues that I think are still yet to continue to help Canada, part of the reconciliation processes and the TRC recommendations, child and family legislation that's still woefully behind. We see unfortunately the Indigenous, the First Nation young ladies and the women that were in the landfill in Winnipeg and that, I think back to only not that long ago where politicians didn't want to go into the Winnipeg landfill and discover, and now they have found the bodies, at least two of them. So these are issues that aren't going away anytime soon. And so I hope that we continue to encourage politicians, each of us, wherever we live, go talk to your riding, to your candidates, and ask them what's their what are they thinking about in the federal election? So I think it's really important that we don't forget the importance of political will on that and so forth. I don't want to throw my colleagues on the spot, but I'm going to ask them if they want to chime in on that. Joe, what's your take so far on the federal election, and how do you feel that Indigenous issues are whether you're First Nation, Métis, or in it doesn't matter, but just Indigenous, do you feel it's been part of the conversation so far? Or is that just maybe a thing I'm thinking of, or what's your thoughts so far?
I would tend to agree with you. I don't see a lot of conversation around Indigenous issues. It's a strange election in a way. It seems like we're overwhelmed by events and happenings south of the border.
Yeah.
And it's concerning to me because Métis and First Nations and Inuit ought to have a voice in and through these processes.
Yeah. Yeah, I do see the good thing, I guess. I do see a fair number of Indigenous candidates in different parties, actually. But I just hope that in this, it seems like we're chasing Trump's behaviors on any given day, and I hope that we don't forget we have domestic issues that have to be addressed as well, and a lot of those are Indigenous related, I might add. Robin, any thoughts you have first week of the? I know I don't mean to put you on the spot politically, but any thoughts you have and what you've seen so far, and in terms of like as a Métis individual, things you're hopeful for, or do you think that are relevant to the Métis people of Canada?
Um, that's a good question, and it's something we should all be thinking about. But one thing I've seen is just a greater unity among all Canadians, whether it's interprovincially, and I'm hoping that will help us to build a little stronger consensus among Indigenous people across the country, because we do have a collective interest in this country to protect our interests, our livelihoods, our economies, and our ways of life. And I was appreciative, Keith, of the meetings we had. I know we met with members of Carney's team and Poilievre's team, and just hearing their perspectives, and it's just good to be engaged. And I'm equally concerned because I think we've got some pretty rough trade winds that we're facing in the months and years ahead.
Yeah, I want to let our members know, and Robin, thank you for bringing that up, because recently, myself with our Vice President Earl Belcourt and Robin were in Ottawa. We did have an opportunity to meet with Liberal leadership candidates and with the Conservative Pierre Poilievre's policy staff, and we reached out to other parties, and we're just trying to get awareness and build that awareness of the politicians as a federal election we knew was looming, that they're at least that they're paying attention to things that are concerning to us, right? And so I think I would just encourage everyone. I think we've got to take that citizenship work that we have to do, and we have to really make something to help politicians realize that they need to pay attention. So, I won't say much more than that. I'll get off this because I could ramble for 20 minutes and people don't want to hear all about that. But I am concerned, and I just want to let people know that I am worried that there has been a lack of Indigenous content so far in policy discussions by any of the leadership groups, whether Conservatives, NDP, Liberal, Green Party, or any of the independent sort of party or smaller parties. I just haven't seen it at a level that I don't recall in the last sort of 4 or 5 elections. Indigenous issues were quite high. Anyways, that I worry about that, and I worry about the impacts of that long term. Now, having said that, we've got lots of other conversations to carry on with, of course, and I know that many there are people online, and I just want to let people know that we'll just get into some other things very shortly. But there are a couple of just quick items I'm going to go through first. I'm going to share a little bit of Métis music, and then we're going to get to know Robin just a little bit more, and some of the work Robin does, of course, with the Federation. I just want to let people know one of our partner communities, the North Thompson Aboriginal Cultural Center Society, they've got their March newsletter out. So their president Cindy Wilgosh, they just released it in their newsletter. I'm not going to pull up the newsletter, but there's free grocery bingo event for seniors. So that sounds interesting. In Clearwater, an area, there's a drum making workshop, and there's many other updates for the community. So keep up the good work. Cindy is one of our partner communities here for the BC Métis Federation. And I'm sure your local members are really appreciative of the work you're doing to just, of course, communication, begets success, right? And there's so many people that when I watch failure, it's often failure to communicate clearly. So keep up the great work, Cindy, and just wanted to just acknowledge the community for doing these kind of things on the ground each month to share that information. Joe is with me today, and Joe, I will come him in a little later in the show, but we are going to talk to Joe a little bit about some of the research work, and we're going to pull it up. But Joe, you were recently at a terrestrial cumulative effects initiative gathering hosted by the Musqueam Indian Band in Richmond. And Joe, just a quick, I guess, information for our members. When exactly was that? And just a little bit about how many people were there, and what was the importance of you being there?
Sure. We were the BC Métis Federation Research Department was engaged with the Government of Canada in the Trans Mountain expansion process. We did capacity research, and then we did a research study where we had the opportunity to actually build capacity into local researchers. Enough said on that in the sense, but you can go to our website, métisinbc.ca, and you can look at some of the information. You can see our team there. It's important for you to understand that we were there, we were representing people who are researchers, who in turn represented communities who want to gather their own history and memory, recover it. So that's the context why we were there. So we were talking about, okay, where do we go from here when it comes to cumulative effect studies? Oftentimes people think of biodiversity, but you know, it was interesting in these meetings, it was First Nations, and I appreciated the Musqueam Nation hosted the meeting, and they were very hospitable. And you know, to see the Métis included in that context was great. Yeah. And the Government of Canada, Chris, was you know, facilitating as well through ECCC, that's Environment Canada.
Yep.
And you know, just to see people in the room, and I had an opportunity to share in a setting at the meeting, and we were just talking about relationality, and we were talking about the idea that we need to be able to connect the work that we do to, you know, the lived experience on the land and water.
So Joe, just stepping back from all that high level stuff, I'm talking about how many people were in the room and when was the event?
Oh, sorry. The event was 2 weeks ago, yep. And there was about 200 people in the room, I would think. And
they're all researchers from local First Nations, other First Nations?
Sure. Mostly, I think mostly Western Canada were represented. As far as I'm aware, it's hard to tell. Yeah. We had a number of, there was one other Métis group represented. It was the former Métis Nation of Alberta, had some consultants there. Yeah. And so we were proud to represent in that room.
And so the work, but like we know there's been some different, you know, challenges between some of the local First Nations with the BC Métis Federation, but you didn't feel that at the meeting, right? Did you feel there was a bit of a change there, or what was your take on that?
In that particular meeting, I felt like, you know, we had a voice and we were respected, and yeah, it's really interesting that, you know, we had an opportunity to share a little bit about our story and talk about some of our common relationships in the historical record, and just share a little bit about the work that we do recovering history and memory in the Pacific Northwest. Yeah. So I think it was a great opportunity to talk about our work.
Well, that was one of the slides I brought up on the screen for everyone online tonight about the Métis BC. Just a reminder, this is an ongoing resource to help sort of tell that story about the history of the Métis in the Pacific Northwest or British Columbia. And I do acknowledge there's been some new work you've done, and one of them is the hidden story in Vancouver. And I want to share this one because, you know, I think, Joe, it's a short video. If it's okay, I'm going to show it for everyone online because it's one of your newer ones, and the department's been doing this kind of work. But it does give a very different take on, and so just bear with me if you're online. I'm just going to show it, so it takes a few minutes. And we'll come back to Joe when this is done. Okay, so, here it is, sorry.
Welcome to Hidden Métis Histories. We're standing in Gastown, the oldest neighborhood in Vancouver, at the foot of Abbott Street. Historical accounts talk about squatter encampments in early Vancouver. What few people know is that Métis lived right around here. at the foot of Abbott Street. This is an old city map picture from 1898. Notice the shoreline was much closer to Water Street in this picture. Today, the shoreline is much further out from Water Street, as you can see here. Here is another picture from 1887 looking east from the CPR docks. Between Carroll Street and Abbott Street, Métis lived in floating squatter shacks. If they made the newspapers, mostly these people were viewed as criminals. This 1898 Vancouver Province story states, "Where are the police?" The article continues, "At the foot of Abbott Street, there are a number of floating shacks occupied by the worst element of the city. It is comprised of men that have no visible means of support, kloochmen, and half-breeds." There were calls in newspapers by wharf owners and businessmen to tear down the habitations. The article refers to shipping men who have large property interests on the waterfront between Abbott and Carroll Streets. Another article states that the police would be glad to see these shacks removed because they are a hotbed of disease and crime. This is the Gastown shoreline today. There is no trace of this settlement. Public and media pressure combined with police harassment suggests a slow, concerted effort to dismantle this settlement. This was part of a larger systemic effort to force Métis people off the land and water to separate them from First Nations kinship. What was ignored was that Métis and First Nations were there on the waterfront before the city existed. A 1906 report states, 15 years ago, the fishing smacks of the early pioneers, half-breeds, and a few Indians occupied the Vancouver waterfront. Today, there is no trace of this settlement. The shacks were removed and the people dispersed, rendered invisible. Descendants are in the process of remembering the past. There is a historic Métis community in Vancouver. How will we remember them?
So Joe, that's for me, that's a pretty powerful piece. Obviously that will come as a surprise to a lot of people. To be very, very candid, right? I mean, we know that's going to be a big discussion for people to say, well, those half-breed people aren't the half-breed people of Saskatchewan, aren't the half-breed people of Alberta, aren't the half-breed people of, how do you help people connect that dot in a simplified way?
Well, I think the first thing we need to understand is it's a very complex conversation when you talk about Métis identity. And Métis identity has been, I guess you could say, described solely in and through the events of the Red River. But what we're seeing is a resurgence. And it started a number of years ago. We saw scholars like Jean Barman talking, in her academic research, she talked about a sprinkling of half-breeds, what they called in the historical records, all through the Pacific Northwest. And other scholars came along and they were saying the same thing. And what's really fascinating is when we're starting to see the idea of Métis scholarship, Métis people doing the work. And that's why I'm so proud of our work, because we're actually working with our researchers to recover their history and memory in these kinship stories. To your point, it is challenging. And like, for instance, just across the harbor, the Burrard Inlet, we found that there were French half-breeds in Moodyville.
Yeah.
And we talked about that story already.
Yeah.
So what do we do with this history? In the past, it's been lost, or it's been forgotten, it's been concealed. And I say that, we want to work respectfully with this history and with our Métis groups and with First Nations particularly, to be able to create the space to be able to uncover this history so we can understand it. It's to us, it's about the respect and the recognition and, like the reciprocity that comes from being able to hear these stories. Like, we know, like, we're looking at the historical record, whether it's the script process or whether it's some of these stories. Métis are there in the historical record. What gets exciting is when I talk to some of my researchers and they realize that, their family histories are integrated into those stories, that we have the same last name, or And then when we start, and this is something I brought out at the conference, I mentioned, look, when we're talking about treaty aid, what we recognize is that the First Nations and the Métis were on the land and water at the same time, looking after one another's best interests. And I have to say, in this heightened political climate we are now, these stories are simply lost and forgotten.
Yeah.
And it's incumbent on all Canadians, all Métis and First Nations to give us the space to recover this history, because it brings healing.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's a very complex. I encourage all those of you. We're going to come back with Joe with some other updates. I'm going to go, but I'm going to take a break with some music. But when I come back, just want to remind people, métisnbc.ca. There's a lot of resources. The story, the video we just showed you there. There's some other videos that actually, one of them is Moodyville, hidden stories. They're there. There's this ongoing research we're doing, and I encourage you to get involved and have a look and become more aware of the presence of Métis people through the Pacific Northwest. The academic records don't lie, and the current contemporary work we're doing to bring that to light is really appreciated. So we'll take a break. I'm going to show some Métis fiddle music, and we'll come back with our guest who's been waiting for me, Mr. Robin McClay. So just bear with us for a few minutes. We'll enjoy some Métis music.
I don't ever remember a time when there wasn't music in my grandparents' house, in my dad's house, in my house, and in my kids' house now.
Most of them played only very, very old tunes from the Red River country. And after a while, I must have been about 5 when I first started playing fiddle.
There were times when we would go to my cookum or mushrooms and we would just dance in the living room. It was just a part of who I was growing up. I didn't know any different.
We would see this square dancing and we'd see this fiddling and jigging. And that's what kept the people together and kept them happy.
It was our social networking. It was how we found out what everybody was up to, right?
They hauled all the furniture out of the house and they danced. They danced for 3 days. And it was just such a wonderful thing to hear and see.
My grandpa John and his brother Max were both fiddlers, and they played these songs that I always knew were different. And I realized later those were the Métis jigging songs.
My mother was a good jigger. When she got on the floor, everybody cleared the floor and watched her do all the different changes. And she probably jigged when she was carrying me.
I'm learning as I'm getting older how important it is to share the culture. I want to be able to teach in different communities. I find Parks Canada is very open to me, being a good role model.
That's something that I hold up Parks Canada for doing, is making sure that the Métis pass on their own teachings. I've been able to go and do some dancing, some performing. It's been a really good relationship, and it's still growing, it's still developing.
It is really important that you leave behind what you think is as true a culture as you can for the future generations.
I think it's part of who we are. It's part of how we grew up, and it's part of our ancestry. It's special.
Well, I thought I would share that because partially because it was a Parks Canada video. Some of you might have seen it on online before, but I guess for me, I don't know if people know, but they just actually, I guess, commemorated the 140-year anniversary of the initial Battle of Batoche, which was the conflict in Duck Lake in March of 1885. So just the other day, right, March 20, I guess the 25th or 24th. But I'm sort of conflicted on that because, again, I have a sort of a love-hate relationship personally with my family experience with Parks Canada, even though I do acknowledge they've done some good work across the country. I feel that the celebration and the commemoration of these things often isn't with the families that were actually from there. I don't recognize a lot of the people that celebrate it in a way that is reflective of our families that were actually impacted. And I won't get down that rabbit hole too far. But I just continue to hope that we work towards more authenticity of the families that were actually impacted. And I think that's incumbent upon all of us to learn that and force that reality of that conversation. And I think that the sooner we do that, the better it'll be for Métis people to know the true history and story of our own people. They get it conceptually. I'm not against that. What I'm saying though is there needs to be more authentic sort of leadership around how we acknowledge those families. So I'm going to cut from that and bring our next guest on. Robin, I know you've been sitting patiently waiting for us, and so I do appreciate that. I want to welcome you to back to Coffee Talk, as I spoke a moment ago or a little while ago. But Robin, you're joining us from Vancouver Island, and we announced you as the new, the interim director of industry engagement. Robin, why don't you tell us about the work you do and who you are?
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Keith, and Joe. Thank you for all the work you do. When I was first nominated to the board, I acknowledged the critical work you do, and we need that body of evidence. And I really enjoyed that video. If you ever wanted a second career, you could probably replace Keith Morrison on Dateline because you kind of have that voice. But again, in all seriousness, I do. I come from a research background, and I really stress the importance of doing all that deep digging. It's thankless work, but it's very important. A little bit about me. I've lived most of my life in British Columbia. I remember I was originally part of the Pacific Métis Federation, and it was did a lot of work with Greg Mazur when I was asked to develop British Columbia's economic development strategy. And from there, I just kept on doing different things. I ended up after I wrote the BC economic development strategy, I was recruited to Harvard University where I did graduate studies, and I was hired on graduation day to head up the Harvard University Native American program, and that's where I was able to kind of bring a lot more attention to Métis issues and Canadian Indigenous issues to the United States, and that even introduced me to a lot of international work. I ended up at Global Affairs, where I headed up their democracy and research departments. But I also helped to create what was called then the Indigenous Peoples Secretariat. So that allowed me the opportunity to engage internationally, and Indigenous people all around the world were looking to Canada for leadership on these issues. So I was really honored and privileged to serve my country in that capacity, and I engaged a lot in the United Nations permanent forums and the expert mechanisms, and even more recently on the SDG dialogues. After that, I ended up heading up the international program at McGill University, where we started to integrate more international Indigenous issues into our research and teaching programs. I was recruited to the MasterCard Foundation, which was based in Toronto. It's an interesting foundation. It's one of the world's largest, with assets, I think, of over 40 billion now. But just recently, they've started to do more programming in Canada to provide scholarship and support to Indigenous students at many post-secondaries all across the country. The first one being here on Vancouver Island at Vancouver Island University. Along with my role as a board member and now this interim role with the Federation, I work with Fulbright Canada, which is one of the world's largest scholarship and research exchange programs. We've got offices in 160 countries, a long history of supporting Indigenous access to education. And I'm overseeing an initiative which is called Honoring Nations Canada. And it's a great example of how we're working with Métis, Inuit, and First Nations to shine a light on outstanding examples of Indigenous-led economic development, innovation, and some of the great work that are being driven by Indigenous people across this country. I advise think tanks in Africa. I'm part of the African Center for Economic Transformation, and another one called the Partnership for Economic Policy, which is a global research think tank that supports research across the global South. I worked on supporting the Mandela Scholars Program, and I'm still very committed to international Indigenous issues. And I'm really pleased to say that Keith and his team, and part of his other hat, the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada, we're going to be organizing an international gathering of thought leadership contribution from truth and reconciliation commissions from around the world. That'll be taking place next year, and the BC Métis Federation and ITAC will be key founding institutional partners of that. So I'm really pleased and happy to be a part of that. And really, the most proud and wonderful thing that I'm doing now is to be a member of the board of the BCMF. I'm so impressed with how engaged we are with the communities that we serve. I know the politics kind of get in the way of things, but we think we're focusing on what really matters. You know, the communities, their lives, their livelihoods, their histories. And that really drew me closer and closer to the Federation. And then just in the last couple of weeks, Keith asked if I'd be willing to take on the industry engagement piece. And without any hesitation, I agreed, because it's important work. And going back to the political stuff that we were talking about, you know, we're going to have to rely on our resources and the engagement. It is really the economy of Canada, and the more that we can have a stake in that, the better it will serve our country, but obviously all of us, including the Métis communities that we serve so well.
You know, David, I mean, Robin, I was looking at someone wrote something on here. Robin, we've added another team member. I'm going to just bring him up on the screen, but maybe just to share a little bit about, you know, we have another team member that you've also helped us sort of work our way with, I guess, to learn about, you know, Mr. Patrick Brennan. You know, I put him up on the screen here. What's his role in relation to the industry side, and how can we help members know who he is?
Yeah, thanks for raising Patrick. Patrick's is based in Ottawa and has spent most of his career working on Indigenous issues, very, very strongly connected to a number of departments. And he's overseeing a large initiative, which is called the Indigenous Internship Leadership Program, which is a partnership with the Business Council of British Columbia, a number of prominent First Nations chiefs, and all 25 post-secondary institutions across BC. So this whole thing is about providing the support, the training, and the relationships that Indigenous graduates need to transition into meaningful employment, including entrepreneurship and apprenticeship opportunities in a number of sectors across BC. So another great addition to the team, with tremendous reach, working with all the major employers across British Columbia. And again, having those close connections to the key decision makers with the provincial government, the federal government, and a number of family offices and private foundations. He's again really honored to be a part of the team, and he's sorry he couldn't make this. He lives in Ottawa, so it's 3 hours ahead.
Well, it's only 10 o'clock there then. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, Patrick's, you know, we've had the pleasure of bringing him, and thank you, Robin, for helping us identify individuals like Patrick that, you know, on the government relations side and policy side will continue just to build our team in a really effective way. And I think it's a really important piece. One last thing, Robin, I wanted to bring up on the screen before I officially, if you want to leave us, let you go. But you know, this week we started some engagement on some of the work you're doing with industry, just to help people at home understand. We had a meeting with partner communities, and one of the many things that the Federation is continuing to be asked to be involved in, this particular one is with Natural Resources Canada around the proposed Indigenous ministerial arrangement regulations, and there's some new work around that with Canada, I guess, and the work, I guess, to sort of see with Indigenous communities around updating around, I guess, Indigenous, what we're calling Indigenous governing bodies, and how we would help represent the interests and concerns of all of our members. And it's something we've kind of done at the Federation anyways, but at least it was nice to have the industry team involved in getting and looking at that. And of course, we'll be providing a submission around the work that related to NRCan and the Canadian Energy Regulator. So I just want to let our members know you're helping us facilitate that work as part of the overall work we do. Any thoughts you had from that initial meeting we had with our partner communities and our members that were able to join us earlier this week?
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that, Keith, because, you know, it's one thing we've got a deep arrangement with the federal officials, with the Canadian energy regulators and all the industry partners. But the most important part of this is to work closely with our communities throughout the region. So when we had that meeting the other day, I was pleasantly surprised and quite moved about how knowledgeable and engaged our membership is across the province. So, sometimes we get swept up in all the policy and the regulations and the big kind of high level engagement with industry. But we've got to put our people, our membership, and the communities at the center. So that was really a nice way to kind of close the circle on my quick introduction to this work. And man, I was so impressed with the group of people that we met with, and I think it was over an hour. And I learned just as much from that as I did with learning about all the technical issues that we have to deal with.
Yeah, like I would just to let our members and those watching, and there's a whole process on the industry engagement side, and we hear about big projects, and the Canadian Energy Regulator deals with large energy projects or the transportation of energy, like transmission lines and pipelines and things like that. So they, under Section 35, which we are Métis community of people, we assert Section 35 interests and concerns and rights. And so there's an obligation to work with us, and if there is proposed changes to transmission lines or additions, or what you got, especially in British Columbia, there's lots of pipeline development. There is an obligation, and we want to make sure that the Métis communities that are impacted by these projects have voice around the life cycle of these projects. And so it's a learning for industry, it's a learning for the government of Canada, and what we're trying to help the partner communities do is understand how they can have more teeth in legal recourse if things are not moving in a good way with proponents. So I think it's just our part of our work at the Federation, and just I won't get into the details of all this with everyone, but it is a changing world in terms of the regulatory strength we're getting as Métis people. And I just want to remind people, and I think it was a healthy conversation with everyone. So I'll just stop there. Robin, any last words of wisdom you want to share with everyone, or any other thing you wanted to touch on before we do take a quick break with some more music?
No, I'm just really pleased to be part of the Coffee Talk circuit, and I just wanted to call out also the good work that Brad Giroux and Jennifer Percival are also doing, because without that support, this would even be more challenging. So and thank you, Keith, for bringing me on board, and to all my fellow board members and BCMF members. It's been a pleasure.
Perfect. Well, welcome to the team, to more, not only leadership, but helping us just as the interim director of industry, and the work that we're going to do. And it encompasses the economic development work, plus this helping us on the regulatory side, plus, as you know, with the Jennifer, with the jobs, and Brad and everyone. So you got your work cut out for you, and you're welcome to join us for the rest of the show. But I'm going to cut now to a break. I'm going to show a little more Métis fiddle music and some other online resources. I think they're really just fun to watch. So I'm going to show a short video, and then we'll come back with updating with a little more work from Joe. Okay, everyone?
Yeah. Okay.
Well, that's some great Métis fiddle music, and I love that piece. I'm sure some people have seen that before on YouTube, but just wanted to share. We don't have unfortunately our resident Métis fiddler Renee Therian. He's offline tonight, so we're making do. But yeah, what a great piece, and obviously some great fiddle music there just to share with everyone tonight. I want to come back. Joe is with me here, obviously, as well. Joe was giving us some insight to the research before. But Joe, there was also another piece of work that you've been working on, and why don't you? Well, I'll bring it up on the screen for everyone at home. But why don't we start there, and then why don't you give us a little bit of insight into the work you're doing?
Sure. Quite a while now, probably over a year and a half ago, I reached out to James Borkowski from the Diocese of Vancouver, a Catholic group, and we went out for lunch, and Keith and some of the others were there as well, and it's just a building relationship, and we put a proposal together, and they worked with us to be able to put this proposal. It's called the Pacific Northwest Métis Knowledge Partnership Project. Now, all that to say is that we realized that in talking because in preparing for this work, we talked to a consultant, and this consultant's name is Carrie Pallister, and she ended up working with us on the project. It's funny how relationships just grow, and it's really important. That's really key to our work. It's really relationally driven. But in history, we knew this, and Carrie concurred with us that Catholic priests and the other workers were really attuned to Métis, or what they called half-breeds, in the Pacific Northwest historical record. And they recorded these lived experiences all through the Pacific Northwest. And you have to appreciate that this extended from northern California all the way up to the Yukon, Oregon country, back in the 1830s and 40s. This is a big body of geographical place. Now, and so a lot, like I said earlier, a lot of this work has been lost or forgotten. So the context here is, we wanted to say, look, we wanted to find a way. We felt there was a need for this research because we knew it was there. We knew that we needed to do a lot more to start the process toward accessing the historical record in the sacramental records. And then we started to learn about where some of these records were. And one thing led to another as we put together a project that included some primer seminars, and Carrie Pallister came along to be able to work with our team. And that was the first step to gather create access for our community researchers. And you could see the enthusiasm and excitement was building because it was all leading toward a visit to you can go down, Keith, go down to the place where we actually went into, now that's a section there where I talk about the research partnerships. Again, not backtracking, but just go to the website and you can see how it's in and around relationship building. And when we implemented the plan, Carrie gave some primer seminars, and you just keep going down and you can see, and here's what Cindy said: "Thank you, Carrie, for working to break down our barriers of access." Now you have to understand, Métis don't know how to access this history. And that's why we really appreciate the growing relationships that are happening between people like Carrie and our community-based researchers. To me, that's the key. We could have hired an academic researcher, a consultant, to go in and do the research independently of the communities and then write a report. And unfortunately, that's the kind of exclusion that goes on out there, where a lot of groups just ignore the communities bypass. We're saying something quite different here. So just carry on down, and you can see where it was really building as we started to go into the community. Go down a bit further. Here, the Royal BC Museum and Archive site visit. And when we went in on that first day, it was so exciting. Our team was so excited. Diane said, "This is a dream come true, coming to the archives." And then Dr. Shelby was there, and he did a lot of legwork with Tanner to be able to just get us into these rooms. We had to sign research agreements and all the rest of it because there were a lot of issues that had to be done just to gain access to it's the oblate records it's a special collections in the archive. There's, so it was really exciting for our researchers. And on January 16th of this year, we went in, just keep going down a bit further, some more comments. Roseanne Forget said, oh, you can read them all there in one place. Just go down. We have the best working team. It was so informative. I can't wait to go back. And then it was an emotional experience. We have such a kind, respectful, and hardworking team making our shared goals to be completed and enjoyable. And the connections from this, coming from this, are amazing. And that was the validation to me, is that our team members could just speak into this and say that it was just so meaningful to them to go into the archives, and that we could provide training for them to be able to start them. And in fact, they're so excited to go back into the archives. And of course, you know, that maybe that will be in a project to come, but that's kind of what we did, Keith. And so we have a couple of social media releases out there. And Karen Prouse at the end, she says, the work in the archives was fundamental, and it highlighted the need for more research in all aspects in the lives of our Métis people, and that really sums it up.
Yeah, I think what I liked about the work that this is one of our departments, as many of our members and partners watching tonight will know. You know, this is all about MétisBC.ca, the whole website here, but the fact is, a lot of this research, or the raw data is there. We just have to bring it together and help people understand what it means, right? Is really what I feel the department is doing, right? They're getting into, you know, these are like people, because I know I've heard people tell me, well, you guys are making it up. We're not making it up. This is actually raw data or raw information that's sitting in plain sight in archives about Métis history in the Pacific Northwest, and touch points and all sorts of kinship families and networks that for whatever reason has been lost in the interpretation of the history of the Métis, our actually evolution of who we were, and that we had a lived experience in the Pacific Northwest. I think what you're doing is uncovering that, and it is a bit uncomfortable for those people that have wanted to pretend we weren't here, that we were just a prairie province people. That's an uncomfortable reality for them to accept, I guess. I mean, you know, that's really what we're doing here.
And I think it's the danger is for people, you know, and scholars have said this even more recently. They've revised PhD theses to say that Métis were actually First Nations. And so you can see how we can revise history the way, you know, to suit political ends. But the reality is Métis, you know, they were here in their own right. And we have a number of different accounts all through the Pacific Northwest where they're saying they were here in their own right as half-breed communities and kinship networks. Right. So, and then, you know, some of them did for reasons of policy or government interference or what have you, or decisions they integrated into First Nations communities. Yeah. And then, as you know, like some of my family, I think of my family, and perhaps many other families amongst us, often they passed into the white Anglo-Saxon, you know, European community. And that was their approach to preserve their identity.
Yeah, it is kind of, yeah, it's important that, I think what the takeaway is, though, I mean, for your team, is it probably was validating for them to see that information, for your researchers to enjoy that experience, to spend that time together, to understand. And now the question is, how do we continue to like help people make sense of it all, right? I mean, really, it's about communication now, right? Mm-hmm. So, but I mean, thank you, Joe, for the work, and thank you to the community researchers. Can you list them all off again?
Well, Karen Prouse is from Old Fort Nelson, and then Cindy Wilgosh is from the North Thompson. Diane Keller is from Kelowna area, and then Roseanne Forget is from Terrace.
Yeah, so, and of course yourself and Dr. Shelby were there as well.
Sure, Dr. Shelby, Bruce Shelby, he's been an ally working with us for a number of years. And Tanner Timothy is from First Nations, fellow from the Siliaman First Nation on the island. Absolutely. He does the GIS with us.
Well, Joe, I want to say thanks for the work. I hope people watching tonight just continue to realize the academic work that's being done to continue putting this story together, and through this we continue to align the family names and the kinship networks to help inform our registry, all that. This is all part of the journey of us reconciling the history of the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Keith.
Thanks, Joe. I'm just going to quickly, I know we don't have much time, but thanks. It's been a really important amount of information from our Director of Research, Joe Desjardins, and of course, Robin McClay is our Interim Director of Industry. But there's a couple other things I just want to touch on before we say goodbye to you for this March update. I just want to say congratulations to our partners at the Peace Region Métis Community Association. On March 13th, they had a youth Dreamcatcher workshop up with the membership up in Fort St. John. And just keep up the great work. I know Jocelyn and the team, they're trying to do everything they can to just have fun activities for families. And of course, that's a really important piece. And just want to say thanks to Jocelyn and the team for that work. We also want to say congratulations and a thank you to the work to the Métis Association of Central Okanagan and Kelowna. You know, Joe was talking about Diane Keller. Well, she's one of the board members there on the local partner community. They had a traditional medicine bag workshop on March 22nd, and they had a nice turnout. And you know, in talking with their president Jennifer, and people are just happy to be doing things together, you know, just building that sense of community, belonging, sharing culture, learning together. So I love seeing these. I know at the Federation, we help provide some capacity support for the partner communities. These are the kind of things we love to see. Like, you know, we try to give as least amount of strings as possible on these resources. Just get out there, have community events, enjoy time together, build that kinship, that local community, and that sense of belonging as a Métis community. I also, though, I want to put a shout out here. I know Joe is often quite humble in his work, but his partner's wife, Danielle, she's been helping pull together Métis members here in the Greater Vancouver area, and they had a connecting Michif language in My Family workshop in Vancouver. So I want to thank our director of Michif language, Jeannie Cardinal, and of course Danielle in the one picture. And we had just a number of friends and family and members here, right here in our Vancouver boardroom office. And I really, really thank everyone that was able to be there on this past weekend. Again, it's about sharing community, bringing people together, and teaching Michif language. And I know that all accounts were it was a great workshop and so forth. I also, again, the Spring Fling Jam session, you know, I didn't talk a lot about it today. I am going to switch gears here a bit, but I'm just so thankful to see the Skeena River Métis Community Association. You know, Roseanne Forget is not only an elected leader, she's also helping on the research side. She's doing all this work at the local community level. You know, it was great to see everyone up in Terrace. I know that's at the Legion, but you know, I don't know if everyone here at home knows right now, but Roseanne and her husband, Ray, they had a terrible situation. They lost pretty much everything in a fire. You know, I just want to let everyone know that we at the Federation are doing our best to help just give Roseanne and her family support. I'm asking all of you, if you haven't provided a small donation, just consider if you can make a donation to help them. They had a horrific fire. Ray, without getting into too much detail, is lucky to be alive today, and they lost most of their belongings. And you know, to tell you what kind of person Roseanne is, we had a board meeting on that day when that happened, the morning of, and she didn't want to leave. I mean, obviously I'd be in shock as well, but she just wanted to be there to help support and just you know, just contribute to our organization. So they've got a GoFundMe campaign, help Ray and Roseanne, was set up by a family friend. And as you can see, they've raised about $6,300 right now, and their goal is to raise $10,000. I'm asking members and friends and family, just if you can spare $20, $50, please do. We at the Federation, I know that Roseanne doesn't know this, but I'll announce it tonight. We're providing them an extra little bit of money to help them out, an extra $2,000 to help the family, because they literally lost everything. Their pictures were online here. They were a resident in a trailer, and you know, it completely was destroyed, and it's a terrible situation for the family. So I just ask all of you, if you can contribute, please do. And I'm thankful to the board of directors for, I guess I went too far there, but I just want to say thank you to the provincial BC Métis Federation leaders for understanding that we needed to be there for this family at a time of need. And I just know that it doesn't offer a lot of stuff, but I just want to say to everyone, you know, with Ray and Roseanne, we support you as we do with many other members, and we're just so thankful that Ray's okay, and we're thankful you're okay, Roseanne. I know it's small solace when these things happen. There's a couple other things I do want to quickly touch on before we wind up tonight. coming here just next week on April 1st, the Peace Region Métis Community Association in Fort St. John is having a Finding Your Voice anti-bullying workshop. So again, to the members in the Fort St. John area, please connect with Peace Region. Take a look at this workshop. It's for an hour from 3:30 to 4:30 next Tuesday, April 1st in Fort St. John. Also, coming up with the Peace Region, they're doing a safety on the internet. Boy, this is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger of an issue for especially our young people. You know, there's so much sextortion and unfortunate challenges online. But safety on the internet, they're hosting a workshop from 1 till 3 on Thursday, April 3rd. That's up in Fort St. John, of course, with Peace Region. We encourage people to really get involved and try their best to support participating in that, in these, especially the younger generation that is facing a lot of other things. West Kelowna is having a fly tying workshop. I know this is one of their board members is an expert angler and he likes to tie flies. And I know I assume he's leading this I won't give his name, but on Saturday, May 10th, coming up at 12:30 till 3:30 at the Métis Association of Central Okanagan. So yeah, members in the Kelowna area, make sure you get a hold of Jennifer or Diane or the team up there. And of course, they will help you register and whatnot. Just a reminder, we've got employment opportunities. Remember, we've updated our website, bcmétis.work. If you're looking for employment opportunities, we've got lots of new opportunities to be sharing. And remember, Métis Coffee Talk is on YouTube. You can load up the shows on our YouTube channel at BC Métis YouTube. So you can watch this March edition or February or January or December before that. Make sure you subscribe to Métis Coffee Talk on YouTube. And also, finally, remember, we're on Spotify, along with, of course, you've heard us talk a lot over the last number of months, other folks, other programs with our conservation team and that, with the information on there. Well, we're almost at the end of the show. Joe, any final comments or anything you want to share to the audience at home tonight?
Thanks, everybody, for spending time with us today. I think there's a lot happening, and it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it does feel like a lot. Doesn't it feel like the year is going by so fast? Like I just can't get over how fast it feels like the entire year is going right now. And I don't know. You said it. I think we both said it earlier when I said it on the show. But it just feels like it feels faster than ever before. That's all I can say. And I don't know how else to say it right now.
They say that's what happens when we get older, Keith.
Is that what it is?
I don't know.
Well, as we wind the show down, I know Renee's not here. Sorry, I didn't have Joe very well on screen there, everyone. But Joe, thank you for being on the show tonight. I know our colleague Robin wasn't able to stick around. And so thanks for being on here. Thanks to Danielle and the work you guys are doing, okay?
Thank you.
Yeah. And keep up the good research. And Renee wasn't here, but I'm going to end the show. And then we'll cut it off right after this video. So I want to say good night and thank you everyone for being here for Métis Coffee Talk for this March edition. Renee wasn't here, but we have some videos that I've played before, and I'm going to end the show with this video. So Renee, we miss you. Thank you everyone for watching tonight. Make sure to follow us on our Facebook and make sure you just get involved, be at our community events and so forth. And next month, we've got lots of information and updates and some stuff in other provinces. We know the other Métis politics are happening in addition to the federal election. The Métis Nation Saskatchewan is having their election in May, and some of you might be following. I have a family member who's also now decided to run for the president of course, the Métis Nation Saskatchewan. So I don't mean to jump around. It's too late to get into that story now, but next month we'll talk a bit more about that. Maybe I might convince him to try and come in and do an interview. I don't know how that'll work, if he will or not. But Renee, we miss you. I want to end the show tonight. So everyone have a great rest of your evening. And this is a final video from Renee, and then we'll call it a night. So take care, everyone.